Hello, friends, and a very good evening. Welcome to today's session on Paper 8 Indirect Tax Laws, CA Final Level. We are discussing Chapter 3. Yesterday, we had our discussion on Chapter 3, and today is going to be our continuing discussion on Chapter 3 itself, Part 2. So Chapter 3 is regarding charge of tax under GST, and with respect to which yesterday we had discussed what are the various levies under GST, what are the transactions and how those separate levies, that is IGST, CGST, SGST, UTGST are levied on a transaction. Then we had discussed reverse charge, supplies covered under reverse charge. We had specifically covered services which are covered under reverse charge. And today, continuing our discussion, we are going to take our discussion forward. Before commencing our discussion, I'm just seeing if there are any queries. There's one query. Harsh is asking, sir, if in case an SEZ unit sells goods to SEZ unit, then will it be chargeable to tax? So Harsh, supply from one SEZ to another SEZ unit. So first of all, I had told you yesterday that supplies by an SEZ unit, largely they have to make direct exports out of India. And when a SEZ is supplying to another SEZ unit, it is equivalent to a zero rated supply. So even if tax is charged on that transaction, so first of all, the supply can be made under letter of undertaking, that is without payment of tax, or the supply can also be made on payment of applicable GST, and later a refund of that GST which has been paid can be claimed from the government department. So with this, we commence our today's discussion. In continuation to services which are covered under reverse charge mechanism, first service which is covered under IGST is any service supplied by any person who is located in a non-taxable territory to any person other than non-taxable online recipient. Who should be the supplier? Any person located in a non-taxable territory. Who should be the recipient? Any person located in the taxable territory other than non-taxable online recipient. So basically what they're talking about here is that if any services are supplied by a person from outside India, that is any service supplied by any person who is located in a non-taxable territory, meaning is located outside India, who should be the recipient? Any person located in the taxable territory other than non-taxable online recipient. And who should be the supplier? Any person located in a non-taxable territory. So this would get covered under import of service, and thereby reverse charge, the liability to pay the applicable GST will fall under reverse charge, and hence such recipient will be liable to pay the applicable tax under reverse charge mechanism. Next is services supplied by a person located in non-taxable territory by way of transportation of goods by a vessel from a place outside India up to the customs station of clearance in India. In such cases, if the supplier is a person located in non-taxable territory and the recipient is the importer located in the taxable territory, then it is the importer who will be liable to pay the applicable GST. So basically, ocean freight we are talking about here. So largely, friends, exports and imports, so international transportation of goods, largely it takes place through vessels. Vessels meaning cargo ships. So here what has been asked is that if ocean freight services are provided to an importer, then such importer will be liable to pay the applicable GST under reverse charge, and the tax payable under GST will be IGST. Next is classification of goods under GST. Now, what is this classification? What is its relevance? So, these spectacles that I am wearing, there is a glass which is there in these spectacles, right? You can see there are two glasses. Now, I can say that this is glass. This cup in which I am having my tea, this is also made up of glass. A glass of water in which I'll drink water, that is also made up of glass. Now normally, when in India we talk about a glass, we are usually in northern India especially, when we are referring to glass, we are actually referring to a glass in which we can have our water or we can have our drink. But when you go to United States or when you go to Europe and when you say, can you give me some glass, he may think of it as piece of glass which is fixed in window, a piece of glass of which doors and walls are formed today. So basically, the point that I'm trying to make is, same things have different meaning in different geographies. So, what we refer to as auto rickshaws over here in India, they are called tuk-tuk in Thailand. So, there are different ways of referring to the same thing. Now, because of this difference of understanding, the problem could be, if I am buying 100 auto rickshaws from Thailand and I am importing them into India, the seller there raises an invoice saying 100 tuk-tuks being supplied, and he says value is Thailand has the currency baht, so they say the supply value is 10 lakh baht. Now when it comes to customs in India, they look at the invoice of the seller and they say tuk-tuk. So they might think if some snacks or some chips or something has come, because that is what they will understand by the name of tuk-tuk. So how do we move above this challenge? How do we surpass this challenge? And this challenge was brought forward to the World Customs Organization. World Customs Organization came out with a solution. Let us do one thing. Let us give a numerical based classification code to every single item. Every single item meaning this shirt that I am wearing, shirt has a separate HSN. The buttons in the shirt, they have a separate HSN. The thread used in the shirt has a separate HSN. These specs that I'm wearing, the frame has a separate HSN. The material of the frame has a separate HSN. The screws used on the corners have a separate HSN. The glass used in the specs has a separate HSN. Now what happened was, you remember that famous idea ad which when Amitabh Bachchan with Abhishek Bachchan used to do? What an idea, Sirji. So in that ad, he mentioned that so as to do away with caste system in India, let us start recognizing everyone by their mobile number. And because if we do that, then we would no longer would be referring to a person's second name, last name, and where is he coming, this, that, so we'll not get to that. So that was just an idea, but actually in the international context, this was actually implemented and a numerical number was given to every kind of commodity, as many as could be identified. And this was accepted by around 125 countries across the globe. And basis this classification is how internationally global trade takes place across the globe. So when I am exporting glass from India, while I will be mentioning description of goods, I also need to mention what is the classification code of that item, and so that basis that classification code, the importing country can accordingly determine what are the goods which are being imported, and they can accordingly assess and levy the applicable duties and taxes in their own country. So how does this classification work? So this system of classification is termed as Harmonized System of Nomenclature, that is HSN. And under this HSN, 5,000 commodity groups have been identified. This is not even items, this is commodity groups. And HSN refers to 8-digit code of classification. 8-digit code of classification meaning where the first digits are the chapter number, the next 2 digits are the heading number, the next 2 digits are the subheading number, and the last 2 digits are the tariff item number. So basically, it's an 8-digit number wherein first 2 digits, second 2 digits, third last 2 digits, second last 2 digits, and last 2 digits, everything has a separate reference point. So this system of classification was already present in customs, and in customs there is a separate act, Customs Tariff Act, Indian Customs Tariff Act, which basically provides for this HSN based classification. And to align GST with the internationally accepted basis of classification, the same concept of classification was also implemented under GST, and hence a product has same classification under GST as well as under customs, that is Harmonized System of Nomenclature. So this is how we progress. So there are various sections in classification, and then talking about 8 digits, First two digits are the chapter number, second two digits are the heading number, third two digits are the subheading number, and the last two digits are the tariff item. So this is how the classification of goods under GST works. Similarly, so till now what we have discussed was applicable to goods, and now we are going to discuss classification of services under GST. So this classification of services is something which was implemented, which came in with implementation of GST only. So there are 99 chapters in harmonized system of nomenclature, wherein chapter 1 to chapter 98 refer to classification of goods, and the last chapter, chapter number 99, refers to classification of services. So under chapter 99, again there are sections such as section 5 dealing with construction services, section 6 dealing with food and beverage, section 7 dealing with finance and real estate services, section 8 dealing with business and production services, section 9 dealing with community, social and personal services, and each section is divided into various headings, which is further divided into groups. Its further division is made in the form of tariff item and oblique service codes. So chapter 1 से लेकर chapter 98 तक classification of goods is provided, and in chapter number 99 classification of services is provided. For the ease of sake of reference, chapter 99 has been broken up into various sections, and section wise distribution of services has been done under HSN based classification. Here you can see the breakup. First is the chapter number, so only chapter 99 is relevant. Then there are section numbers, then there is heading, then there is group. So in goods it is subheading, here it is group. Next is service code, in goods it is tariff item. Okay. Any queries still here? Okay, so two people have written regarding security lending scheme. So what I'll do is, let us first finish our session for today, and towards the end of the session I'll take up that security lending scheme again. Okay. So now we are moving on to discuss composition levy under GST. Now we are discussing charge of tax under GST. The charge of GST, we know there could be a normal scenario. Normal scenario is known as forward charge. Forward charge meaning I am a chartered accountant, I am registered under GST, I provide services. So I am liable to collect the GST from my customer and deposit it with the government. Then we discussed another type of levy, that is under reverse charge, wherein the recipient is liable to deposit, self-deposit that amount of tax with the government. And now we are going on to discuss composition levy under GST. Composition levy under GST, it says an option for specified categories of small taxpayer to pay GST at a lower rate. So what is composition levy? What is its relevance? Why was it implemented under GST? Composition levy basically provides for is actually a benefit, a relief for small taxpayers to not get into the hassle of detailed compliances. So this first of all is only relevant for small taxpayers, that is, who do not have their turnover above a threshold. Secondly, this is applicable for taxpayers. The benefit that is derived from this is they have to pay tax at a lower rate. The procedures that they have to follow are simple. Then the calculation of tax on turnover is also simple, and a simple quarterly return is required to be filed as against multiple monthly returns otherwise. So these are the benefits of composition levy. So first of all, composition levy, as I mentioned, is a benefit for small taxpayer. A small taxpayer can choose to pay tax under composition levy. Why would he choose to pay tax? So it's an option. When I say he can choose, he can choose. So either he can opt or he can choose not to opt. Okay, so it's an optional, it's not mandatory. Secondly, there are certain conditions, and if those conditions are fulfilled, only then a person can get covered under composition levy. Otherwise, he cannot. Next, if any of the condition is breached, immediately the composition levy benefit will lapse and the person will have to move into the category of a normal taxpayer. Thirdly, there are certain disadvantages of being under composition levy, and there are certain advantages of being under the composition levy. So, with this understanding, let us now move forward with our discussion with respect to composition levy. How to obtain registration under composition scheme? If a new registration is being obtained under GST, then intimation in the registration form should be filled. So basically, when you're a person who does not have any registration under GST, he is obtaining registration under GST. First time, therein in the form itself, he can mention that though I am obtaining registration, I want to be registered as a composition taxable person. And thereby, he will be covered under composition scheme effective from the date of grant of registration. So, he will be covered under GST effective from the date of grant of registration. Next is registered person opting for composition levy. So suppose there is a person who is registered under GST as a normal taxpayer, but so like this year, there was COVID, and the businesses have had a deep impact because of the lockdown, people cautiously spending their money, this, that. So now this registered person opts for composition levy. So he, a already registered person, can only file an intimation prior to the commencement of a financial year. So basically, a continuing registered person can only move from normal taxpayer to composition prior to commencement of financial year and not after that. So it has to be prior to the financial year. However, if a person is obtaining registration for the first time, then that person can obtain registration under composition levy at any point of time, middle of the year, starting of the year, end of the year, anytime. When I say year, I am referring to the financial year. Now, I told you that opting for composition scheme, there are certain advantages and certain disadvantages. What are the advantages? We just discussed about classification. That there is an 8-digit classification for every goods and services, and it is internationally applicable in this and that. But the law says, if a person is covered under composition scheme, then that person need not worry about classification. Next, such a person is not required to issue a tax invoice. He can simply issue a bill of supply. The tax invoice involves some more greater details, whereas bill of supply is comparatively has lower amount of details. So this, what is tax invoice, what is bill of supply, we will discuss in the documentation related chapter. Next is required to pay a certain percentage as tax. So basically, any person who is covered under composition scheme, he has to pay tax at a fixed percentage, that is either 1% or 5%, and this tax has to be paid on the entire turnover. So a person covered under composition scheme could be dealing in mobile phones, and mobile phones are otherwise chargeable to 28% tax, but this person who is a composition supplier, he can pay tax on the entire turnover at the rate of 1%. So you would be thinking, oh, mobile phones 28% tax, but a composition person will only pay 1%. Wow, what a wonderful benefit. My friend, this is where you need to become cautious. Next it says, no input tax credit available. So if this mobile phone, the dealer, composition dealer has bought this mobile phone for 50,000 rupees, or for the sake of simplicity, say for 1 lakh rupees with 28% GST, so 1 lakh he has paid the principal amount plus he has paid 28,000 GST. And now if he is selling it for 2 lakh rupees, so first of all that 28,000 he cannot avail ITC, and that 28,000 will become a part of his cost, and thereafter on the entire 2 lakh value, he again has to pay 1% tax, and that would be another 2,000. So put together 28,000 of input tax credit lost, but 2,000 plus 2,000 tax paid on turnover, put together 30,000 rupees paid as GST on this single purchase. Okay, so advantages as well as disadvantages. All registered persons having same PAN shall avail composition scheme. I am a dealer who deals in motor vehicles. I have a dealership in Delhi, I have a dealership in Mumbai, I have a dealership in Kolkata, I have a dealership in Chennai, in Bangalore. And I say I will opt for composition, and all these 5 locations I have covered under one entity, A Limited. And I decide, because A Limited will have a common PAN number, I decide that for the Delhi location I will obtain composition scheme, and for the rest of the places they are doing good, they will continue under as normal taxpayer. Is that possible? No, that is not possible, because if a person is availing composition scheme, then that composition scheme should be applicable at each and every location covered under the same PAN number. Okay. So, in my case, in A Limited's case, either all the locations, that is Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, Kolkata, Bangalore, all the 5 locations will have to be covered under composition, or none. There is no middle way. Next it says penalty shall be imposed in case of irregular availment of composition scheme. That is, penalty if any person unduly or being ineligible avails composition scheme under GST, then that person will be liable to punitive action of penalty under GST. Now, what is the, I told you that composition scheme is a benefit which is largely restricted to small taxpayers under GST. So, what is the relevant turnover for obtaining composition scheme under GST? It is INR 1.5 crores. So earlier there was a lower limit, but now the same has been increased to INR 1.5 crores by notification number 14/2019, Central Tax, dated March 3, 2019. However, in case of special category states, that is Arunachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Sikkim and Tripura, so all of these are hilly states, but these are not all hilly states, okay? So what all states are not covered here? Assam, Himachal Pradesh and Jammu and Kashmir. So basically, Arunachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Sikkim and Tripura, here the limit for composition scheme, the turnover limit for composition scheme is INR 75 lakhs. And for Assam, Himachal and Jammu and Kashmir, the relevant turnover limit is INR 1.5 crores. Why is it 75 lakhs for these states? 75 lakhs for these states because in hilly states, comparatively, the business sizes are smaller, and hence, accordingly, a smaller threshold limit has been prescribed so as to suitably work around that particular geography. Now, what will be the inclusions and exclusions from the turnover? Inclusions would be value of all outward supplies, including taxable, exempt, exports, as well as interstate supplies of persons having same PAN, that is, supplies to distinct person or stock transfer. So these all will be included in the turnover. What would be the exclusions? CGST, IGST, SGST, UTGST and cess. That is, all the taxes which are payable under GST plus value of all inward supplies on which tax is payable under reverse charge. So both of these will not be considered for the purposes of calculating turnover under GST, and the inclusions would include taxable exempt exports as well as interstate supplies of persons having same income. Next, another exclusion from while calculating turnover for composition scheme purposes. Another thing which is to be excluded is the interest income. What is this interest income? So this 1.5 crores is what you can imagine. It is a limit for small businesses, and these small businesses, they are generally grocery shop owners, retailers. So what they do is, along with their business, they generally create some FD income, some interest income from bank, some interest income from giving out small loans. So all this income that they garner, this earlier, because the definition of turnover under GST is so wide, so it was being thought that this interest income will also have to be included. And so the government said, no, we genuinely want to give benefit to small taxpayers, and that is why we are adding another exclusion from the turnover definition, and that exclusion was interest income, which mentions that is interest income from what? Extending deposits, loans or advances in so far as the consideration is represented by way of interest or discount shall not be taken into account in computing aggregate turnover in order to determine eligibility under composition scheme. So, what you can say in nutshell, there are three exclusions. One is taxes payable under GST. Next is inward supplies, because they are purchases, inward supplies which are liable to tax under reverse charge, as well as interest income. Now, what would be the effective rate of tax on various kinds of transactions under composition scheme? So, depending on the activity being undertaken by the person, different rates of tax have been prescribed under the composition scheme. If a composition taxpayer is undertaking manufacturing activity, then that person will have to pay tax at the rate of 1% of the turnover. If restaurant service providers are undertaking, if the person covered under the composition scheme is the restaurant service provider, then that particular taxable person will have to pay tax at the rate of 5%. If he is a trader, then that person has to pay tax at the rate of 1%. So this 1%, 5% and 1% is actually the effective rate of tax. So, which means that it will be, in case of manufacturer, it will be 0.5% CGST and 0.5% SGST. In case of restaurant service, so when you go to McDonald's, Domino's, KFC, Pizza Hut, you can check also. So the bill that you will be receiving, it will be 2.5% CGST and 2.5% SGST. Similarly, for traders, again, it will be 0.5% CGST and 0.5% SGST. Now, friends, I told you that generally people who are covered under composition scheme are small taxpayers Small taxpayers meaning generally they are grocery shop owners, retailers. So another source of income that they have is that they create a fixed deposit, they give loans, small loans to businessmen and accrue some interest income. Another thing that they do is, generally if a retailer has a shop, he will create another floor on the top of his shop and he will try to lease it out or rent it out to some company and thereby start earning some rental income. And he may have some house property which would have been given out on rent. From that, he'll be earning some rental income. So the point that I'm trying to make over here is that typically these small businessmen are doing their business in proprietorship form. That is, the person who is paying tax is a sole proprietor. Second of all, this person also has additional sources of income, that is from interest, from rental of property or from any other source of income that could be covered under service. Earlier, when GST was implemented, composition scheme strictly was applicable only for supplier of goods. And even if a person had even 1 rupee of income from provision of service, he was not entitled to the composition scheme. So this point was raised, before the government, that this is a really harsh provision wherein provision of services not being allowed under composition scheme and hence a limit up to which services can be provided and still the person can avail composition scheme. A certain amendment was made. When was this amendment made? This amendment was made on February 1, 2019. So, earlier a person engaged in supply of services, of course other than restaurant services, because restaurant was specifically covered, so it was known that of course when I'm going to McD, I'm getting a burger, I'm getting air conditioning, I'm getting clean environment to sit, I'm getting services also. So there it was more or less agreed. But otherwise for a manufacturer or a trader, he was not allowed to have any service income. So what was the benefit which was given? That they were allowed to undertake supply of services, but up to a certain limit. And what is that limit? 10% of the turnover in state or union territory in the preceding financial year. That is, determine what was your turnover in the preceding financial year. Suppose it was 1 crores, then this year you can go up to 10% of that turnover, that is 1 lakh rupees. Or 5 lakhs, whichever is higher. So suppose in the prior year, if the turnover was 25 lakhs, so 10% of 25 lakhs would be 2.5 lakhs. However, 5 lakhs is a separate benchmark which has been placed here. So accordingly, a person will pick 5 lakhs and the maximum that it can be, so maximum turnover limit under composition is 1.5 crores and hence 10% of 1.5 crores is 15 lakhs. So the maximum can be 15 lakhs and the minimum can be 5 lakhs. So up to this percentage, it was fixed that if a supplier is undertaking supply of goods as well as supply of services, he can still opt for composition scheme provided the proportion of services provided does not exceed this prescribed percentage. So, basis this, can I as a chartered accountant avail composition scheme? No. Why? Because I am a chartered accountant, 99.99% of my revenue is coming from services. Whereas this composition scheme is allowing only 10% from services. And hence, effectively, if you see, the composition scheme is primarily for supplier of goods, allowing a certain small percentage of its entire supply towards supply of services. So, this is a summary chart of the conditions attached for availing composition scheme. We'll discuss this chart and thereafter we'll take a break of 10 minutes. Once we have discussed this chart, thereafter we'll take a break of 10 minutes. Okay. So what are the conditions attached for availing the composition levy? The aggregate turnover should be up to 1.5 crores in the preceding financial year, and in specified category states it should be 75 lakhs. Tax should not be collected from the recipient, that is a composition taxable person. I told you now, I buy this mobile phone for 1 lakh, I pay GST on purchases, no ITC available. Plus, I sell this mobile phone for 2 lakhs, I have to pay tax on the entire turnover on that 2 lakh. That 1% I have to pay out of my own pocket. I cannot charge it from my purchaser, no. I have to pay it out of my own pocket. So, tax not to be collected from the recipient. Input tax credit will not be available, already discussed. And composition scheme to be availed by all registered persons having same PAN number. That is, ICAI Limited has 5 locations in India. I choose to go for composition for 2 locations. For the rest of the 3 locations, I want to continue as a normal taxpayer. That would not be allowed, and hence either every location gets covered under composition scheme or none of that gets covered under composition. What are non-eligible supplies under composition scheme? Supply of service other than restaurant service exceeding 10% of turnover or INR 5 lakh, whichever is higher. So, a supplier of service wherein the percentage of service is above the threshold prescribed for that composition levy. So, like in my example, I told you that the proportion of services is 99.99%, and hence I would not be eligible for this composition. Next is supply of goods which are not leviable to tax under GST. Very important that if a person is dealing in non-taxable goods, that is petrol, diesel, aviation turbine fuel, alcoholic liquor, that person of course cannot opt for composition scheme. Interstate supply of goods. Interstate supply of goods. Interstate supply of goods. A person covered under composition scheme on his supply side cannot make interstate supply of goods. However, he can make interstate supply of services. on the purchase side, he can purchase interstate supply of goods as well as interstate supply of services. But only one condition, he cannot undertake interstate supply of goods. So you recall, in my example, I gave you the example of a grocery shop owner or a retailer. Generally, where are they making the sales? They are making the sales at their counter. And that is why, because they are making sales at their counter, that is why all of their sales are intrastate supplies and none of it is interstate supply. Next is supplying goods through an e-commerce operator. So if a person is undertaking supply of goods through an e-commerce operator, and which category of e-commerce operator? That category of e-commerce operator who is liable to deduct tax at source under GST by section 52 of CGST Act, that is Central Goods and Services Tax Act, that person again cannot opt for composition scheme. So like I told you now, example, Amazon, Flipkart, Snapdeal. So the seller is some other person, they are just an online marketplace. So any person who is supplying goods through such e-commerce operators, he cannot opt for composition scheme. And lastly, if a person is undertaking manufacturing of anything which is not good for your mouth, what all goods are not good for your mouth? Tobacco. Remember the ad which comes before starting of a movie? And that person is famously referred to in Kapil Sharma show also. So chewing tobacco is injurious to health. So manufacturer of tobacco. Second, pan masala. There is a famous meme or joke going around that there was a foreigner who came to India and he saw people in India spitting blood. And he got really worried what has happened in India. And he started taking those people to doctor saying that they are spitting blood. And the doctor laughed at that foreigner saying, boss, they are not spitting blood. Meet this Rajnigandha and all these famous brands of pan masala. He is chewing pan masala and spitting it. So, pan masala. Third, what your parents used to tell you when you were young, that don't eat too much ice cream, you will get a freeze bite, or that ice cream will actually give you a sweet tooth and that may ultimately result in cavity. So anything which is not good for your mouth. There is another addition. Baba Ramdev using cold drinks, aerated water for what? For washing urinals. That this is not good for health. This is to be used for cleaning urinals. So aerated water, when you drink any soft drink, aerated soft drink, you will feel that your teeth, they slightly start feeling sticky, right? So anything which is not good for your mouth, what is it? Ice cream, pan masala, tobacco. If person is undertaking manufacturing of either of these, he cannot opt for composition scheme. What are the conditions and restrictions? Person availing composition scheme should neither be a casual taxable person. What is casual taxable person? I am a contractor. I am based in Delhi. I have got a temporary contract in the state of Odisha. And in Odisha, neither I have any address nor any location. Just because of that contract, I have temporarily gone to Odisha for doing some work. And after that work, I will come back to Delhi. So, because I will be doing some taxable activity in Odisha, the law mandates that you obtain a temporary registration as a casual taxable person or CTP. And if any person is a casual taxable person, that person cannot opt for composition scheme. Similarly, in India, in Mumbai, metro is being constructed. And who are the pioneers? This Mumbai to Ahmedabad bullet train is being constructed. And because this is the first time in the country bullet train is being constructed, where is the expertise coming from? Japan. In Japan, they say if a train is late even for a few seconds, the driver apologizes. What happens here? If it is late even for hours, what does the train management and the driver say? Aa to gayi na. At least we are here. So what if we are late? Right? So don't be that person. Learn from Japan. Don't learn from the Indian context. So that is what we and you, the next generation, has to improve. So basically, a Japanese entity comes into India temporarily. They do not have any office in India. They are only here to share their expertise on the development of bullet train. They give some inputs and they go back to their country, Japan. So that person, again, because they are doing taxable activity in India, government mandates that obtain a temporary registration under GST as non-resident taxable person. And hence, if a person is a casual taxable person or a non-resident taxable person, both these persons are not eligible to offer compositions. Next it says, stocks have not been purchased from an unregistered supplier where purchased, tax has been paid under reverse charge. So, example of this mobile. I am an intelligent person. I see if I buy this mobile from a GST registered person, I will buy it for 1 lakh rupees plus 28,000 GST. And that 28,000 will become cost. Let me buy it from an unregistered person. When I buy it from an unregistered person, what is the GST? 0. How much have I said? Hypothetically, 28,000. Now, I will sell it for 2 lakh rupees, pay 1% tax, and the net cost will be only 2,000 rupees. Wonderful. Let me have multiple registrations under composition scheme. What a wonderful tax saving mechanism. Government says, no. You have to incur that cost on your purchases. So either you buy from a registered person, bear that cost of tax, or if you happen to buy it from an unregistered person, then you have to pay the applicable GST under reverse charge. Okay? And why under reverse charge? Because of section 9 subsection 4 of the CGST Act. Next it says liable to pay tax under section 9 subsection 3 and 9 subsection 4 on inward supplies. So all the reverse charge services that we discussed, this composition person is also liable to pay. Plus, if he is making purchases from any unregistered person, this composition taxpayer has to pay. Then, again, this person should not be engaged in manufacture of notified goods. What are notified goods? Ice cream, pan masala and tobacco. Next, a composition taxable person cannot issue a tax invoice, and hence the document that they can issue is bill of supply, and the bill of supply must clearly mention composition taxable person not eligible to collect tax on supplies. So this is what they should clearly mention on their bill of supply. Plus, wherever is the place of business, so the grocery shop or the retail shop, stationery shop, when you go next time, you can see it is mentioned on some places that they are a composition taxable person under GST. Why is this required? So that the purchaser also comes to know that he is making purchases from a composition taxable person, and that is why the composition taxable person cannot charge any tax from them, and they will accordingly not be, first, they are not required to pay any tax upfront under GST, and secondly, whatever purchases they make from this composition taxable person, they cannot avail any input tax credit. So basically, with the board, it is advertised that it is a composition taxable person, plus it is also mentioned on the invoice. So this, friends, is till here regarding our discussion regarding the composition levy. I am now pausing our discussion, our session for 10 minutes. Okay, we'll take a quick break of 10-12 minutes. In the meantime, if you have any queries, please feel free to put that in the query box. When I come back, I'll first address the queries and then I will reconvene our today's session. Thank you. Uh, Ashwini from Chennai is asking, are you receiving my queries? No, I'm not receiving your queries. Pragya, okay, Ashwini has another query. Sir, explain again composition scheme of supply of services. Ashwini, I've yet not discussed composition scheme for supply of services, okay? So what I've discussed is, and let me tell you, for all of you, just let me please make it clear. I'll only explain a concept once, okay? And it is very important that you please pay attention to that, okay? Because then there can be no end to repetition. And in CA final course, because we have to cover such a vast course, we cannot afford to keep on repeating. And at best, what you can do is, you can read that, come back with specific queries, rather than simply saying repeat it, because you are not the only person that I'm tutoring. I have 100 of other students who are appearing, right? So if 99 have understood and one is asking to repeat, that will not happen. Still, since you mentioned composition scheme for supply of services, I have not yet discussed. What I have discussed is that a person covered under composition scheme can also engage in provision of services only up to INR 5 lakhs or 10% of turnover, whichever is higher. This is simply what I have discussed. Go back, read it after today's session, automatically it will become clear to you. Pragya is asking, please explain what do you mean by irregular availment of composition scheme. So irregular availment, Pragya, I would have said it in a particular concept, but legally it means nothing. So irregular at best can mean this, and you can also practically connect that someone was doing a turnover of 3 crores, 2.5 crores. So in financial year 1920, his turnover was, or even financial year 1920, his turnover was, say, suppose 3 crores. But in the present year, due to the corona and lockdown, he is looking at a turnover of mere 1 crore. So for 1920, he would have paid tax as a normal taxable person. This year, he would want to go under composition because the turnover has gone lower. Next year, maybe again his turnover would become 3 crore. Then again, he will have to step out of the composition scheme. So it's a continuing business scenario. Any situation can come up. So at best, we have to be prepared for every situation. Sridharan is asking, turnover for composition to be calculated for current year or previous year? Sridharan, a simple logical question. If I have to avail composition scheme for financial year 2021, will I avail prior to 2021 or after 2021? Prior to 2021. And if I am availing it prior to 2021, can I know the turnover of 2021? No. What does that mean? You will have to see the turnover of the previous year. Okay, my dear? Nitish from Ludhiana. Sir, if a supplier supplied interstate supplies of goods in the last year and he is not going to make any interstate of supply of goods in the current year, then whether he is eligible for composition levy? Yes, Nitish. While he is under composition scheme, he cannot make any interstate supply of goods. If in the prior year he was not under composition scheme, he could have done anything. But the turnover has to be there. This year, if he is going to be under composition scheme, this year, while being under composition, he should not make. If he makes, then that is fine. But he will have to step out of the composition scheme. So with this, we have covered all the queries that I have till now. We are now moving back to our discussion. Now, Another benefit which in a manner can be said to be composition scheme for service provider. Composition scheme for service providers. But legally, what is it named as? Option to pay tax at concessional rate under notification number 2/2019 central tax rate. So, as is evident, this option was introduced only in 2019, whereas GST is there since 2017. So, the option which has been introduced is option to pay concessional tax. Concessional tax meaning at what rate? So, usually the services otherwise generally are chargeable to tax at the rate of 18%. However, under this benefit, concessional rate benefit, the person can undertake to pay tax at the rate of 6%. So that is 6% is the effective rate of tax, wherein 3% would be CGST and 3% would be SGST. And registered person whose aggregate turnover in the preceding financial year did not exceed INR 50 lakhs, that person, and he is not eligible to pay tax at the composition scheme. So, of course, what the law says is that if a person is eligible for composition scheme, that is a supplier of goods, he should go to composition scheme. No point for coming in here. And of course, why would a person want to come under concessional rate of tax when he can go into composition scheme and pay tax simply at the rate of 1%? And otherwise, the turnover limit under composition scheme is 1.5 crores. But here, what is the turnover limit? It is 50 lakhs. And Sridharan, as you can see, again here it is mentioned in the preceding financial year, it did not exceed INR 50 lakhs. Now, what are the conditions? Registered person not engaged in any non-taxable supply. That is, the person should not be making any non-taxable supplies like services of funeral, burial, cremation, or this petrol, diesel and everything. That the person should not be making. Registered person not engaged in making interstate supply of goods as well as services. Goods as well as services. Goods as well as services. So here is where even interstate supply of services is restricted. But in composition scheme, the restriction was only and only for interstate supply of goods. But here, the restriction is even extended to interstate supply of services. Registered person, neither a casual taxable person nor a non-resident taxable person. What is casual taxable person? What is non-resident taxable person? This we have already discussed. Registered person not making any supply through e-commerce operator required to collect tax under section 52. So this again we had discussed earlier. Registered person not engaged in making supplies of notified goods. What are those notified goods? Things which are not good for your mouth. What are those? Ice cream, pan masala, and tobacco. And similarly, so most of these conditions, you will find them same as they were applicable for composition taxable persons, right? So registered person neither entitled to collect tax nor avail any input tax credit. Registered person will issue a bill of supply and not a tax invoice. All persons having same PAN to avail this option. So I cannot say that if I have 5 offices PAN India, 2 offices will opt for concessional rate of tax and the balance will pay tax at full rate and be a normal taxable person. Cannot happen. Single PAN, everyone has to opt for the same scheme. Registered person liable to pay tax at the said rate on all outward supplies up to INR 50 lakhs, and registered person to pay the applicable tax on inward supply covered under section 9 subsection 3 or subsection 4. So basically they will be liable to pay tax as applicable under reverse charge, same as in case of a normal taxable person, same as in case of a composition taxpayer. Similarly, on all outward supplies, that is, on the entire value of 50 lakhs, the person has to pay tax at the rate of 6%. He cannot say that out of this 50 lakh, this 10 lakh was exempt, this was that. No. The entire value of 50 lakhs, you have to pay tax at the applicable rate. In computing the aggregate turnover, value of supply of exempt services by way of extending deposits, loans or advances, inasmuch as the consideration is represented by way of interest, shall not be taken into account. So, this exempt services of deposits, loans and advances, they are not to be taken into account for the purposes of calculating the aggregate turnover. Any registered person who has availed input tax credit opts to pay tax under this option shall pay an amount by way of debit in the cash ledger and the amount to be equivalent to the ITC held in stock, contained in semi-finished goods or finished goods and on capital goods, and any balance in credit ledger shall lapse. So this condition that has come up, this is basically talking about any person who prior to 2019 would have been a normal taxpayer. Suppose the person had turnover from services of 45 lakh rupees. So till then there was no such option of paying tax at concessional rate. So he would have been charging and paying tax at the normal rate plus availing input tax credit. Now this person chooses to go into this concessional rate of tax scheme. So here is where this person will have to reverse all the input tax credit on stock, semi-finished goods as well as finished goods. So basically, there are two kinds of people who would want to avail this scheme. Primarily, it is for service providers, and secondarily, those specific category of people whose turnover is below 50 lakh, but the portion of services is higher than 5 lakhs. For example, there is a person who deals in selling remotes, but is also providing repair services on remotes. So from sale of remotes, his turnover is 20 lakh, but from repairing remotes, his turnover is 30 lakhs. So total his turnover is 50 lakhs. He is selling goods, but only for 20 lakhs. He is providing services, but for 30 lakhs. So he cannot go into composition scheme. Either he can continue as a normal taxpayer, or he can be covered under concession rate. So this person, when he is moving from a normal taxpayer scheme to the concessional rate scheme, he has to reverse entire ITC on goods held in stock, contained in semi-finished goods or finished goods, and also on the capital goods, and any balance in the credit ledger, that after paying all these taxes, if there is any surplus balance in the electronic credit ledger, that balance of input tax credit would also lapse. That is, the entire amount in the ITC has to be zero. However, if suppose the tax payable on such stock, capital goods, comes out to 10 lakh rupees and the balance available in the input tax credit ledger is only 7 lakh rupees, then the balance 3 lakh has to be paid through cash. CGST rules as applicable in case of composition scheme shall be mutatis mutandis applicable here. Now, like I told you now, so persons who cannot opt for neither for composition scheme, persons who can neither claim composition scheme nor payment of tax at concessional rate are the following persons, that is, manufacturer of ice cream, pan masala, tobacco and aerated water. Aerated water is what? Generally soft drinks. Now, with this, we have completed our discussion pertaining to composition scheme and payment of tax at concessional rate. Let us now discuss Section 9, subsection 4. So, Section 9, subsection 4 of CGST Act. Yesterday, I had told you that Section 9, subsection 4 talks about that a registered person making purchases from unregistered person was liable to pay the applicable tax, the reverse charge. However, because this section was imposed a very harsh condition, and that is why the operation of this section was suspended by the government, and presently also largely this is suspended. And now the amendment has been made in Section 9, subsection 4, that while earlier it was generally applicable, now the section has been amended to provide that Section 9, subsection 4 will only be applicable in case of specified supplies or specified circumstances only. What does it say? The government may, on the recommendations of the council by notification, specify a class of registered persons who shall, in respect of supply of specified categories of goods or services or both received from an unregistered supplier, pay the tax on reverse charge basis as the recipient of such supply of goods or services or both. So what does the section now say? Has to be a specific class of registered persons, and it has to be specified category of goods or services or both, and it has to be received from an unregistered supplier. So if all of these three are cumulatively satisfied, only then Section 9, subsection 4 of CGST Act will become applicable, and an identical section, a similar section, is also present in IGST Act, that is Section 5, subsection 4 of IGST or Integrated Goods and Services Tax Act. Friends, yesterday we had discussed a specific kind of service which has been recently inserted and is inserted by way of an amendment, and this service, the category of service is providing renting of motor vehicle services to a body corporate wherein the cost of fuel is included in the value charged from the company, and the supplier is any person other than company who is paying tax effectively at the rate of 5%, that is CGST 2.5 and SGST 2.5. Input tax credit only of input service in the same line of business is availed, and the recipient is the body corporate located in the taxable territory. So this is what we had discussed yesterday. Now you remember we had also discussed GTA service. In GTA service also, if the GTA was charging tax at the rate of 12%, then the recipient is no longer liable to pay tax under reverse charge mechanism. However, if the GTA is not paying tax at the rate of 12%, and if the recipient is one of those specified persons, then the recipient is liable to pay the applicable tax under reverse charge. So a somewhat identical type of condition is here present here also, where it says 5% case scenario we had discussed that if he is paying 5%, then there will be a reverse charge liability. Plus there is also another condition. If tax is being paid at the rate of 12%, where supplier of services opts to pay GST at said rate, in this case, the person, first of all, the person who is supplying these services will no longer be restricted to only avail input tax credit for services in the same line. That is, he can avail input tax credit for everything that he has purchased. Whereas, if the person is wanting to pay tax at the rate of 5%, then he could only avail input tax credit of services in the same line of business. So that is one difference. And secondly, if 12% tax is being paid, then the recipient will no longer be liable to pay the applicable GST under reverse charge. So this entire discussion can be best understood with the help of this chart. This chart says where GST is being paid at the rate of 12%, transaction will be covered under forward charge. Forward charge meaning normal method for payment of tax, wherein person who is liable to pay the applicable GST is the supplier. However, where GST is being paid at the rate of 5% and the supplier is a body corporate or a company, again the liability will be covered under forward charge and the supplier will be liable to pay GST. But if GST is being paid at the rate of 5%, supplier is not a company, recipient is a company, or recipient is other than, if recipient is a company, then that company has to pay the applicable GST under reverse charge. Another exception, GST is paid at the rate of 5%, supplier is a company, recipient is not a company, again the liability to pay the tax will be on the supplier. So effectively, reverse charge liability, there have to be 4 conditions satisfied. GST is being paid at the rate of 5%, Supplier is not a company. Recipient is a company. If all these three conditions are satisfied, then it is the recipient who is liable to pay the applicable GST under reverse charge. With this, friends, we have completed the entire, not only the course curriculum, not only the Board of Studies chapter, but we have also covered all the recent amendments, and we have also covered the course chapter also. So now I would request all of you to put forward your queries, and thereafter we will move to discuss practical queries as relevant for our chapter. Any queries that you may have pertaining to yesterday's discussion or today's discussion, you may please put that forward, and we'll first discuss those queries, and thereafter we'll move on to discuss practical examples. Have you put in? Okay, since I do not see any queries, let us please move on to discuss some practical queries. Okay, so I am first going to take practical queries from Can you see your board of studies? I have picked up the chapter. Can you see the practical question? Can you see it on your screens? Can please some of you confirm in the comment section, query section? Can you see the questions, practical questions on the screen? Is everyone with me? I'm awaiting your response. Harsh, Ambika, Madhumita, Mansi, Ashwini, Pragya, Sridharan, Nitesh, Ravi. Okay. So, I believe you are able to see it. Otherwise, simply be with me. I'm repeating everything. So it says, now we have to determine whether in the following scenarios a person would be liable to pay, who will be the person who will be liable to pay the applicable GST, whether the supplier or the recipient. And the first question is, services are provided by an arbitral tribunal to any business entity. The question is, services are provided by an arbitral tribunal to any business entity. Who will be liable to pay the applicable GST? The arbitral tribunal or the business entity? At least 5 people to answer for me to move forward. Arbitral tribunal will pay the applicable GST or the business entity will pay the applicable GST? 5 people to answer at least, and then I will move forward to the next query. I am repeating my question. Services are being provided by an arbitral tribunal to any business entity. Who will be liable to pay the applicable GST, the arbitral tribunal or the business entity? Two people have answered. Okay. So what I'll do is, you can see it, but I believe when I move on to seeing your response on my screen, okay, I believe I have a solution for that. Okay, please keep answering. Please keep answering. Please keep answering. I'm pulling up your answers on other screen. Okay, so you've answered. 2 people have answered. You must be seeing a blue screen when I move to see your responses on the screen. I was trying to see it on my mobile phone, but it is slightly stuck. So don't worry. I believe you've answered business entity, business entity, business entity, recipient, business entity. Wonderful. 6 answers. Everyone has answered correctly. Next, sponsorship services provided by a company to an individual. Sponsorship services provided by a company to an individual. Now what would be your answer? Sponsorship services provided by a company to an individual. Who will be liable to pay, the company or the individual? Come on, at least 5 people to answer. I'm seeing only few people are answering. Rest are taking a break, right? Let the other people work. Why should we take so much trouble? Okay, so I believe there are mixed answers. So Niranjan has given correct answer. Nitish, okay, so two people have answered for this. Now I need at least 5 answers. Mansi is saying individual, Ravi is saying company to liable to pay under forward charge, Parvinder is saying tax payable by company supplier. Okay. So Ravi, Parvinder and Niranjan have answered correctly. Why? Because yes, sponsorship services are covered under reverse charge, but only when the recipient is either a company or a partnership firm. See, I told you, we have to remember the type of service, we have to remember who's the supplier, we have to remember who's the recipient. 3 things we have to remember, then we can say we know what is reverse charge. Some of you have written company, business entity. Boss, it is very, very specific. Sponsorship service, immediately your mind will say covered under reverse charge. Company bhi pad liya, lag raha hai reverse charge. But no, the recipient is individual and hence it is the company which will have to pay. Next, moving on to C. So whoever answered, good. Who answered correct, very good. Who did not answer, please step in and answer now. Because who answered right, very good. They got a commendation. Who answered wrong will now remember this till their exams. Matlab, you may err somewhere else, but you will not err for sponsorship service. Why? Because you answered, I gave the answer, I told you you are wrong, immediately it will enter as a memory, feed it as a memory in your mind. You will never forget that now sponsorship service, you will never go wrong for that. So whoever is not answering, please answer right now. Next it says, renting of immovable property service provided by the central government to a registered business entity. Now in your answer, when you answer for this, mention C and then mention your answer. It will be the central government or the business entity. Come on, at least 5 people to answer. Come on everyone. Renting of immovable property service provided by central government to a registered business entity. Let me see who all have answered. Niranjan, business entity, correct. Okay. Neha saying business entity, okay. Why have other people not answered? Niranjan saying C, business entity, correct. So, the correct answer here for this is because it is a registered business entity. Had this been only business entity and this not registered, again, there would have been no liability under reverse charge. But since the recipient is a registered business entity, hence the recipient will be liable to pay the applicable GST under reverse charge. Next it says, a person availing composition scheme, we are moving on to question number 2. A person availing composition scheme in Haryana during a financial year crosses the turnover of 1.5 crore during the course of year, that is, he crosses the turnover of 1.5 crore in December, will he be allowed to pay tax under composition scheme for the remainder of the year, that is, till 31st March? Can that happen? Can he continue even for the period beyond December under the composition scheme? Yes or no? In your answers, type 2, yes or no. Will he? Yes, he will continue under composition scheme. No, he cannot continue under composition scheme. Yes or no? The question is here. I am giving you 2 minutes to answer. Thereafter, the screen will go blue. I will move to your answers. 2 minutes to answer, and the answer has to be a simple yes or no. At least 5 people to answer. Okay, so now I'm moving to your answers, please. Three people have only answered, Sneha, Ravi and Niranjan, and all three of them have answered correctly. I don't know why other people are not answering. So let me tell you, whoever answers will score an exemption in the upcoming IDT exams. This, I'm telling you, whoever regularly answers during the course of class, he will score an exemption in upcoming exams. Now it is up to you. You choose whether to answer or not to answer. And this defensive approach of sitting silent and observing what is happening and not taking part on the course, right? There are two kinds of people. When you, in life also and in a sports game, there are two kinds of people. One is who is on the ground and playing the game. So he will air, he will drop a catch, he will hit a six, he will take a wicket, he'll miss a catch. But at least he's in the game, right? So Sachin Tendulkar did not every time score a century, but yes, he did better than the others, right? And there would be a lot of people in the stands, okay? The main role is to cheer for the people when they do good in the grounds. Like people who are answering, you'll say, oh wow, he answered correctly. And when he answers wrong, boo, he answered wrong. See, he was trying to act smart. Look, he's answered wrong. But let me tell you, people in the ground, people on the ground, people in action will always be in discussion at the forefront, doing much better than people who take comfortable seats back in the stands. Everyone knows Sachin Tendulkar. But how many people know the people who've gone to watch Sachin Tendulkar play? It will be a laughing stock, right? Maybe thousands, maybe millions. So very important, very, very important for you to actively take part. It's for your benefit only. Even if none of you answers, I will still complete the course. But that would mean you could have made a lot. I would still complete the course. I've already completed the chapter. Let me tell you, I can still go ahead and close the class. You can sit at your home. I can comfortably, sit at my home. Tomorrow I have office also. I'm doing this merely because of passion. So even before the class begins, 1 minute before I was taking a call, in the break I'm taking a call. After that I will send some mails. I'm just doing it merely for passion. I am not teaching anywhere privately. So it is only for you. And if your response is such laid back, then somewhere either you're not satisfied with the teaching method or there is a lack of interest for the course in general. Anyways, I can only suggest you have to decide whether to take action or not. Question number 3 says, determine whether the supplier in the following cases are eligible for composition levy, provided their turnover in preceding year does not exceed INR 1.5 crore. So one is Mohan Enterprises is engaged in trading of pan masala in Rajasthan and is registered in the same state. And second, Sugam Manufacturers has registered offices in Punjab and Haryana and supply goods in neighboring states. So their turnover is well within the defined limits of 1.5 crores. There are two questions. First one is, Mohan Enterprises is engaged in trading of pan masala in Rajasthan and is registered in the same state. So can Mohan Enterprises opt for composition scheme? So you have to write one, yes, no. And second, Sugam Manufacturers has registered offices in Punjab and Haryana and are supplying goods in neighboring states. Could be Delhi, could be UP. So for this you have to write two, yes or no. Okay? I am giving 2 minutes. Then the screen will go blue and thereafter I'll look forward to what all answers have come. Okay? 2 minutes. So 1 more minute. Okay, so good people have answered now. Let me see. Mansi says, okay, so two people, a good amount of people have answered. So first of all, I'm going to name out all the people who've answered. Mansi from Mumbai, Sneha from AP, Ravi from Dehradun, Ambika from Mumbai, Dilip from Bangalore, Mayank from Kukreshwar, Niranjan from Bangalore, Kanika from Jaipur, Sai Prakash from Bangalore, Prajakta from Nagpur, Nitish from Ludhiana, and Devija from Kollam. So first of all, my sincere congratulations to all of you to at least decide and come forward. So the number is immediately shot up from 3 to 13 people. Okay. So all of you are willing to do it, but you need some doses of motivation, right? I believe every time. Because you're finding it a very boring course, right? A very dry subject. Don't worry. Now, a special shout out to those who've answered correctly. First is Nitish from Ludhiana, and second is Kanika from Jaipur. Now, let me be honest with you. In the first one, even I had a slight confusion. I was somewhere 80% sure, but 20% even I had to reconfirm. And I must give it to Niranjan and Nitish. No, sorry, not Niranjan. It's Kanika and Nitish, that if they've answered it purely on their understanding of the session, then they've understood it very well. So, where is it that maximum people went wrong? Let me quickly show that to you. Where is it that maximum people went wrong? The maximum people went wrong in determining whether Mohan Enterprises will be eligible or not. And why did the maximum errors occur? Because as soon as people read Pan Masala, they simply recalled bad for the mouth and simply this person cannot avail composition scheme. But do you remember in our discussion, we had specifically emphasized on the point that it has to be manufacturer. Manufacturer of pan masala, manufacturer of ice cream, manufacturer of tobacco, manufacturer of aerated water. And here, what is Mohan Enterprises doing? Trading. So what is Mohan Enterprises? A trader. And because he is a trader, not a manufacturer, owing to this reason, Mohan Enterprises, even if dealing with pan masala, can still opt for composition scheme because he is not a manufacturer. Second point, Sugam manufacturers having registered offices in Punjab and Haryana and supplying goods in neighboring states, this of course cannot opt for composition scheme because interstate supply of goods, and hence interstate supply of goods is specifically restricted. That is why Sugam manufacturers cannot opt for composition scheme. So, maximum of you answered this correctly, but one or two of you answered it incorrectly. So, see, when we read it, when you are in the session, तो आपको लगता है सब समझ में आ रहा है, सब clear हो रहा है. We are understanding everything. Oh, this is looking so easy. But have you ever imagined the situation? I mean, you've already given your intermediate exams, right? So it's 6 exams and intermediate back to back, or abhi to you get 1 day leave. But earlier it used to happen today accounts, next day this, next day this, next day this, next day this, next day this. For you, it's 1 day exam, 1 day break, 1 day exam, 1 day break, right? So this indirect tax exam, this will be your last exam. If you are giving both groups together, I always suggest giving both groups together. So if you're giving both groups together, even if you are giving a single second group, it would mean this is your last exam. You've given accounts, auditing, costing, FM, direct taxes, and now indirect taxes. And indirect taxes, GST, supply, charge of tax, exemptions, valuation, point of supply, place of supply, customs, documents. It's too much. And this discussion we've had today, and today it is confusing you. How will you prepare yourself better? By taking in more tests, taking in more questions, cross-examining yourself. Sit down once you complete the course. Take up a question paper, answer that, self-check it. That is where, one who has studied well, he'll score 60. One who has given tests well may even score 80. One who has given multiple tests may shoot up to 90. Because what is the improvement happening? Both of them might have put in equal amount of efforts, equal amount of study. But what will refine when you test yourself? Your answering, your way of answering, your catching of the concept. You're doing it within the time, because often people complain very lengthy, 3 hours were not enough. So it's very important, and this is the best opportunity. You have to just sit and answer. Query is there. I am there to correct you if you are wrong. Right? Next is Subramaniam Enterprises has 2 registered places of business in Delhi. Its aggregate turnover for the preceding year for both the places of business was rupees 1 crores 20 lakhs or 120 lakhs. It wishes to pay tax under composition levy for one of the place of business in the current year, while under normal levy for other. You are required to advise Subramaniam Enterprises whether he can do so. So at least 10 people to answer, and if anyone answers wrong, I will come out of this screen and I will reprimand you personally. अगर किसी ने भी गलत बोला इसका आंसर, तो he will have it from me. मैं इसी स्क्रीन में से बाहर निकल आऊंगा. So at least 10 of you have to answer, and you have to answer it correctly. Come on. Can he do so? Can he choose 2 different options? Yes or no? Yes or no? Can he choose 2 different options? For one, he opts for composition scheme, and one he continues under normal taxpayer. Can he? Yes. Can he? No. 2 minutes. One more minute. At least 10 people to answer. Otherwise, I'll keep on holding here only. Your one query is pending now. What happens to lending scheme and is it only liable to IGST? Those two people who answered that query, they'd have to specifically answer. Only then I will consider this. Otherwise, I'm not discussing. Okay. Wonderful. So the people who have answered are, in fact, a lot of people have come forward and answered. And I'm really happy to see that all of you who've answered, all of you've answered correctly. Harish, Dilip, Dipali, Ravi, Srinivas, Mansi, Kanika, Sneha, Dilip, Ambika, Richa, Harsh, Mansi, Sai Prakash, Devija, Parvinder Kaur, Mayank Chajed, and Saurav Kumar. Wonderful. So that's absolutely correct. That Subramaniam Enterprises, he cannot opt for two different approaches or separate options for his two locations under same PAN. Either he will have to avail composition scheme for both the locations, or he can choose composition scheme for one, or he will have to be a normal taxpayer for both the locations, right? So friends, now let us move back to the specific query that you had raised with respect to uh, with respect to the point of lending scheme. So let me just quickly pull that out from your board of study material only. Or let me do one thing. Let me quickly pull out yesterday's PPT, and from that PPT we can take it forward for discussion. Okay. So here it is. Okay. Just a moment. I'm just pulling that PPT out for you. Okay. Just be with me, please, for 2 minutes. In the meantime, if you have any other queries pertaining to your chapter 3, you may please put that forward in the query section. I'll just take 2 minutes to pull out that security lending related discussion. Okay, so finally here it is, and let me just quickly share this one. This is where we go to. Okay. So I believe you will be able to see the PPT now. Can you give me a... Okay, so it's very much there. Now I'm just scrolling back to see what were the queries which were asked. Okay. So the screen will go blue, don't worry. I'm here with you. I'll just quickly see. One was asking whether it is also covered only under IGST. Ambika is asking, sir, in case of security lending scheme, IGST is payable irrespective of place of service. No, Ambika, that is not the case. Madhumita, sir, please repeat security lending scheme. Priority sector lending certificate. Section 9, subsection 4, okay. So here, I believe one of you was asking regarding security lending scheme. So security lending scheme can be covered under CGST plus SGST or IGST, okay. So it's not anywhere written that this is only covered under IGST, that is one. Then the second question was relating to priority sector lending certificate. So priority sector lending certificate, it is nothing so special. The only thing that we had discussed was that priority sector, so government earmarks some priority areas such as women entrepreneurs, farmers, agriculturists, where the government wants that every bank, every financial institution should extend certain percentage of their total portfolio loans specifically to these people so that they can have easy access to funds and can be brought up as entrepreneurs. So some banks exceed their targets, some banks are not able to meet their targets. So what the government has done is that priority sector lending certificates, the bank which has exceeded the target can sell their excess targets to the bank who has underachieved such targets. So why they are doing so? So that a bank, once it meets its target, still continues to work in the priority sector area because they know due to this they will be able to generate priority sector lending certificates which they can sell to other banks. Okay. So one was a query whether it is exclusively covered lending scheme under IGST. No, that's not the case. Priority sector lending certificate happens between a banking company, financial institution, NBFC, and this is where the recipient is liable to pay the tax. What is priority sector lending certificate? That I have already shared. Any further queries? Yes, Dilip Kumar, we did discuss Haryana answer. The answer was he cannot take registration under composition scheme because he is supplying to neighboring states. Neighboring states would mean that he is making interstate supplies. So Yash is asking, sir, if supplier registered under notification services under RCM, does it levy to GST? Yes, composition taxpayer have to pay tax at on the total turnover basis. Okay, so under reverse charge is what the recipient will pay that applicable tax under reverse charge. The supplier, composition supplier, simply what you can take a note is that they have to pay tax on the entire turnover. So Kanika is saying that composition dealer cannot do interstate supply as it's applied to SEZ in IGST section 7 subsection 5 deemed interstate supply. Can he go composition? So Kanika, your queries is not entirely clear, but what I can understand is you're trying to say whether a composition taxpayer can make a supply to SEZ. So let me tell you, SEZ supplies is as good as, of course there are IGST supplies, zero rate supply, interstate supply, deemed interstate supply, and hence that cannot be made. Plus any SEZ would not like to buy from a composition dealer also. So composition dealer in effect is only there for small time taxpayers, retailers, grocery shop owners, small electricity shops, or small, you could say stationery shop owners, right? It's not there for people who are supplying to SEZ or something. Let me even tell you, practically, big organizations are not even preferring to deal with small tax, unregistered taxpayer or composition taxpayer. So otherwise, legally they may not be required, but practically they are forcing them to register as a normal taxpayer. Only then they are giving business to them. Richa is asking, no, Dilip, where he crosses 1.5 crore, that also we have discussed, that once he crosses 1.5 crores, then he cannot continue under composition scheme, okay? Richa is asking, difference between section 9 subsection 3 and section 9 subsection 4. So, Richa, this I had discussed in the earlier class, that under section 9 subsection 3, specific category of goods and specific category of services have been covered under reverse charge, wherein who should be the supplier, what should be the supply, who should be the recipient are covered, right? Like government giving renting of immovable property services to a registered business entity. So what should be the service? Renting of immovable property. Who should be the supplier? The central government, state government, local authority. Who should be the recipient? A registered business entity. And when all three conditions are satisfied, then the reverse charge becomes applicable. However, section 9 subsection 4 simply deals with the fact a specified registered person receiving goods oblique services from any specified unregistered person, he will be liable to pay tax under reverse charge. So basically, section 9 subsection 4 deals with those category of persons wherein a registered person is receiving supplies, procuring supplies from unregistered person. That is the difference. Okay, Ambika is asking, can you please explain composition levy with respect to promoter builder? Okay, so ideally, not everything is to be discussed in the class, but Okay. So GST rates in real sector, it is on page 3.39. Is everyone able to view this page 3.39 with me? So here it talks about effective rate of GST on real estate sector for the new projects by promoters are as follows. So friends, let me give you the background. First is that the real estate sector in the country is going through a bad phase because in the past people per se have had bad experiences in buying flats because builders had overcommitted and under-delivered. So there were various frauds, unfulfilled promises which were prevalent in the market, so that there was a trust deficit with builders in the general public. Secondly, demonetization had resulted on a huge impact in the real estate sector. On the other hand, our Prime Minister has an ambitious vision that when everyone should have their own home, I believe by 2022 is when they've set a target that everyone should have a home for themselves. And that is why a special category has been carved out as affordable housing scheme. So, with respect to this background, government had given some relief to the real estate sector whereby it was mentioned that for affordable houses, what is affordable houses? Where the area is 60 square meter in metros and 90 square meters in non-metros, and the value is up to 45 lakh. In such cases, the GST can be paid at the rate of 1% without availing input tax credit. So while directly it is not a composition scheme, it is the taxation is happening like composition scheme only. That is, don't avail ITC, pay tax at the rate of 1% provided the houses are covered under affordable housing scheme. That is, in metros, that is Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, the area should not be more than 60 square meters, and in non-metros, it should be not more than 90 square meters. Next, 5% without ITC is applicable on construction of all houses other than affordable houses. So otherwise, in real estate, they are taxable at 12%. But if the builder chooses not to avail input tax credit, he can simply pay tax at the rate of 5%. And commercial apartments such as shops, offices, etc. in a residential real estate project in which the carpet area of commercial apartments is not more than 15% of the total carpet area. So what happens is, suppose if a builder takes a huge piece of land, 5 acres, 10 acres, 100 acres, and he says, I will build residential apartments as well as commercial buildings. So this 5% benefit can only be availed in those cases where out of the total carpet area, maximum 15% is towards commercial apartments and the balance is towards residential real estate projects. Now, what are the conditions? Of course, no input tax credit can be availed, and 80% of inputs and input services used in supplying the service shall be purchased from registered person. What does this mean? Mobile, I am a composition dealer. I bought mobile for 1 lakh, I paid 28,000 GST, 28,000 becomes cost. So I start acting smart, I buy it from an unregistered person. I pay only 1 lakh, no GST. And then I sell it for 2 lakh and pay GST only at the rate of 1%. So that is not allowed. You have to pay tax on the purchases if you have not paid tax at the time of purchase. Pay tax and don't avail ITC. The condition is not don't avail ITC. Condition is make tax paid purchases. If it is not tax paid, pay tax out of your own pocket and don't avail ITC. Same concept has been brought in here also. We'll give you 1% rate for affordable housing. We'll give you 5% rate for other residential housing, provided don't avail ITC and at least 80% of your purchase, other than some specified items, should be from registered person. Registered person meaning that they should be tax paid purchases. Clear? So simply this is what is specific to real estate. And someone was asking what is difference between section 9 subsection 3 and 9 subsection 4. So section 9 subsection 4 mandates that a composition taxpayer pays tax on their purchases from unregistered person. A person covered under concessional rate of tax, that is services related, pays tax on purchases from unregistered person, and a real estate sector registered person pays tax to the extent of 80% of purchases of the total purchase. So that is where section 9 subsection 4 of CGST Act comes into picture. Okay. So with this, friends, I believe we have completed the entire discussion, detailed discussion pertaining to our chapter 3. We have holistically covered the entire chapter. Still, if you have any queries, please feel free to put them down in the comment section. So Sai Prakash is asking, if composition person purchases goods from another composition person, whether GST is liable to be paid under reverse charge. So Sai Prakash, it is as good as buying from a non-registered person only, right? Because it would say no tax is chargeable, no ITC is available, and hence my opinion is a composition person buying from another composition person would still mandate okay, I'll come back on this query. I'll reserve my comments on this query. I will reserve my comments on this query. There is one aspect. I'll park your query and I'll take this up in the next class, Sai Prakash. Any further queries? Okay. So Dilip, don't worry. This is just for the continuing sessions. We will have dedicated sessions because these are very small little queries that we are doing right now. Once we complete the entire course, then we will do case study based questions wherein it will involve place of supply also, time of supply also, registration also, documentation also, and that would be good questions for your final exams basis. Okay. So right now we will have to move in this order only, and still maximum of you are answering incorrectly. So that should be an important aspect to look at, right? So still you are answering, and right now we have no other option but to move in accordance with the material, study material, so that we are on the same page. And once we complete substantial amount of course or the complete course, that is where we can bring in new questions, entire case study based long questions for you. Any other queries? Okay, I'll wait for one more minute to see if there are any further queries. And Dilip, we'll for every class, for second chapter also, we had done some practical questions. For third also, we've done some practical questions. For every chapter, we'll continue doing some practical questions, of course. And once we complete our entire course, then we will do long case study based questions wherein our holistic knowledge can be put to test. We have a good 100 responses today put together. Yeah, you can continue to do that, Dilip. It's highly recommended that every day you go back and study what has been discussed in that class. And of course, there is a limitation in the class. We can only take a handful of questions. Please go back and take up as many questions as you can along with your study of that day, because there is nothing like it if you can take up those queries. If there is anything which you don't get cleared in those queries, you can certainly come back to me and we can discuss those queries also. So great, friends. One query from Sai Prakash. I'm parking it for the next session. And with this, we are concluding our today's session. So we have completed Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3, along with the amendments, along with the practical questions. And next, when we meet in the next class, we are going to take forward our discussion onto the next chapter. Okay? So with this, once again, requesting all of you to please go back and study today itself the complete chapter. Take up other available practical questions with you which have been prescribed by the Board of Studies. Go through them thoroughly and let us meet again in the next session. Till then, good night and goodbye.